An interesting approach to freedom comes from Immanuel Kant. He has a very systematic approach to ethics, which requires a complex process of a priori reasoning. We are only going to look at part of it in this film, because for a question on "Are we free beings?" you will not need to know the whole system in detail. However, you will be able to see here how Kant shows that freedom is an essential assumption that we must make if we are going to claim any kind of deontological approach to ethics. In his critique of pure reason, Kant explains that everything that we perceive using our senses. If I perceive an orange, it is using the sense of sight to see its shape, colour and texture. I use my sense of touch to feel its shape and texture. I use the sense of taste to understand the sensations it produces in my mouth, and I can use the sense of smell to capture its aroma. All this information is channeled to me through my senses into my brain, which sorts out the information that it receives and organises it. I can therefore understand that I perceive an orange because my senses tell me so. However, what if my senses, having organised all the information, have interpreted the data differently from another person? What if the data is interpreted differently from the actual orange itself? Kant argued that whilst there really is an orange, what it is and what I perceive it as are two different things. Whilst we can experience things, he called experience of such things phenomena. This is different from the reality, the objective item. The objectively existent item is the noumena, but we can never really know the noumena. We can only know the phenomena. At least we can only know the phenomena through our senses, because the moment we perceive anything sensory, our perception interprets it and it becomes phenomena. We can then say that determinism offers us sensory evidence that we are determined and our actions are caused by things outside of us. However, nominally we are free. We can know this not through the use of sensory information, but by the use of reason. Kant claims that a priori reasoning can lead us to discover that there is an objective moral ought that can be applied universally. He calls these moral oughts categorical imperatives. These categorical imperatives are moral laws that are absolute. Reason dictates that it is illogical for the laws to be any different. If I can say you ought to do something or you ought not to do something, then I make a basic assumption in doing so. I assume that you can follow the imperative. It would make no logical sense to say you ought to move if I have tied you to a chair. I could not blame you if you didn't follow my instruction. However, if I give you the command you ought to move, then I imply that it is within your power to obey. Ought implies can. Thus, whilst Kant acknowledges that he has not proved that we are free, logically, freedom is an essential assumption. It is a postulate of practical reason. To exemplify Kant's formulation of the categorical imperative, we can use the example of stealing. According to Kant, if there is indeed an objective moral law, it must all be applied to all people regardless of time, place and circumstance. Thus any rule we make must be universally applicable. Since this is the case, we must also ensure that we do not use other people as a means to an end. People are valuable in and of themselves. So we must act when formulating laws as though we are law-making members of a kingdom of ends, or valuable people. In this case of stealing, then, if I make a rule that says take what you like when it suits you, thus allowing people to take what they want when they feel it is best for them, this would have to be applied to all people universally. This would mean that we would no longer have any system of ownership, since stealing relies upon the assumption that each person owns things for themselves. We would have to treat all items as belonging to all people universally. However, stealing involves the person that you are taking from having an objection to it. Stealing only works if people have an exclusive right to their own belongings. Otherwise, it's redundant. It wouldn't even be stealing. So, in fact, it only makes sense to have a categorical imperative that says never steal. Stealing can only exist if it's considered to be unacceptable. freedom is logically necessary for morality to work, and if a priori we have demonstrated that there are in fact categorical imperatives, then Kant would argue that nominally we are free, even if there is phenomenological evidence for determinism. Thus, we are free and so morally responsible for our actions.